Welcome to the road to Acapulco. There's a new idea in town, an idea that's been heralded by Bob Podolsky for 32 years. It's an idea that will change the world, and it's beginning to take shape in Acapulco.
Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of The Road to Acapulco. This is Michael Nimetz.
And Bob Podolsky.
Bob is here. And today, we had talked at the end of the last podcast about talking about the Octologue and its ramifications towards business and how that works. But because of some things that have happened recently in the news, we decided that we were going to talk about something that I think is much more important and certainly a discussion that is going to be, a buzz around the community is this new law in Florida that apparently makes Bitcoin illegal and all the Bitcoin users criminals in Florida. So, Bob, let's talk about your initial reaction to this new law.
For me, I'm not surprised. 2 years ago, roughly, I wrote an article that appears on titanians.org about the new free market that is represented by Bitcoin. That finally, after thousands of years of not having a free market on the planet, we have one now thanks to Bitcoin. And I predicted when I wrote that article 2 years ago that eventually governments are going to outlaw Bitcoin. It's going to be illegal to use Bitcoin because it doesn't go through the banking system. It can't be tracked by the banking system. And it does provide for a free market. And there are powerful interests that don't want free markets. We haven't had one all these thousands of years because of those interests. So here we are, 2 years after I predicted it would be made illegal. Sure enough, Florida is making it illegal. So it's not a surprise. It would be a surprise to me if it never occurred.
Now, the actual bill that we're talking about is Bill 1379 from the Florida legislature. Mm-hmm. And I did look the bill up, and it's about a 13-page bill that talks about a lot of different things, as most legal legislation does these days. It kind of meanders through a lot of different things, but essentially, all the different cartels get their little piece of the action, and I'm not exactly sure what this actually means for the average Bitcoin user, but it certainly could mean that on any particular day, if for whatever reason someone understands or finds out that a Bitcoin user in Florida is using Bitcoin, that they might just be arrested for simply admitting that they're using Bitcoin or having evidence that they have a Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I think that's a pretty big development for people in Florida, and certainly for people in Florida that are engaging in commerce using cryptocurrencies. I'm sure it's not just Bitcoin. I'm sure it's all cryptocurrencies, of course. But this is a big deal because I think this is another indication of just how the system continues to roll over people, criminalizing everything. It's not really that big of a deal in regard to the criminalization of citizens, because already most people are breaking multiple laws every day, and practically everybody in the United States is essentially doing something illegal every day.
Mm-hmm. So I've heard, and I think it's true.
So it's just another, but it is another indication of the creeping nature of government, that it just keeps sucking up more and more of people's freedom. And even when we have some kind of innovation or technology that gives us a little bit of freedom, pretty soon they see that freedom and then they start to suck that up too. And so it's a little depressing if you look at it that way, but what do you think are the ramifications of this long term?
Well, first of all, this phenomenon is not limited to Florida. It appears in the news first in Florida about a year ago when someone was arrested, and then they couldn't prosecute him because they didn't have laws in place to prosecute Bitcoiners. And the trick in that case was that the Bitcoin dealer was selling Bitcoins to someone who admitted to them that they were acquiring their Bitcoins illegally. Well, it turns out that it was...
Was they using their Bitcoin illegally, or was it they were using it for illegal activities?
Well, in that particular instance, it was the fact that the guy selling the Bitcoins knew that the buyer, or was told that the buyer was making his money doing something illegal.
Yeah.
That put him at risk. Now, as I understand it, and I'm not 100% on this, but as I understand it, the person who sold him the Bitcoins and who admitted to making his money illegally was a government agent. So it was a setup. It was a scam from the beginning. It was entrapment, exactly. Now, the thing to me that is interesting is it's not limited to Florida, because we have the instance in Arizona. My friend Morpheus, who has been making his living buying and selling Bitcoins for a couple of years, he just got arrested when he went to sell Bitcoins to a customer. Now, I know Morpheus really well, and I know that he has a policy in place that if someone tells him that they are making their money illegally, he will not sell them Bitcoins because of what happened in Florida. He recognizes the risk. In fact, he doesn't even want to know your name if you're a customer of his Bitcoins. He gives you a nickname if you don't have one of your own. And so he doesn't know his customers the way the banks are required to know their customers. And he doesn't want to. All he's doing is selling access to strings of letters and numbers. That's what Bitcoins are. Strings of letters and numbers that go through computers. Period. That's what they are. There is no justification for making that process illegal. It is vastly unjustified, unethical, evil kind of thing going on there, but typical of government. Typical of government. And as I said 2 years ago, the governments of the world, when they realize what is at stake, they're going to have to make Bitcoins illegal and try to stop people from using them. And they will fail in this ultimately. They have to. There's no way that they can possibly keep people from using cryptocurrencies. However, they'll try, and they will make it illegal. They will shut down local Bitcoins. You won't be able to go online and find a local Bitcoin dealer who will sell you Bitcoins privately if they have their way. But the fact is that there will always be networks of people buying and selling Bitcoins that they cannot stop. And so in the long run, I'm suggesting that the Bitcoin community will win the battle. But it's going to be a battle. It's going to be horrendous. Eventually, I'm predicting they will make it illegal to have a Bitcoin wallet. And the phone companies, like...
It'll be like drug paraphernalia.
Exactly. Exactly. It's paraphernalia. That's right. And they will eventually outlaw the paraphernalia, so you will no longer be able to go on your telephone and download an app that is a wallet for Bitcoin. They will make that illegal. And the phone companies that are making it possible to download wallets, those phone companies will comply because they don't want to have their license revoked for doing what they do. They can be shut down by government and they don't want to be, and so they will comply with this, and it'll be harder to get a wallet. You won't be able to just go on the Google store and download a free wallet. It may come to a point where you'll have to buy a wallet because they may be scarce, and it may be difficult to acquire them, and they will be, again, regarded as contraband.
Yeah, well, it's pretty clear that things like computers and phones and stuff like that are already under the attack as far as the Fourth Amendment illegal search and seizure. The idea that they're not papers, so they're okay for the government to confiscate and look through, and if they want your password, you've got to give it to them or else. And then, of course, if they do have the possession of your phone or your electronic equipment, and it does have Bitcoin on it, oh my God, you're a money launderer.
Right. That will be the tack that they take. I mean, it's very predictable when you think about it, because the free market that we all want so much, it cannot exist if we don't have a medium of exchange that is private, that is resistant to government interference.
Well, do you think that, the technology behind Bitcoin, the blockchain technology, is essentially something that, enables a whole bunch of new things.
Right.
And we're just at the very beginning of what those things, what all those things are. But is it possible, do you think, that the government will adapt their currency to blockchain technology and essentially create their own version? Because, all these other things that blockchain technology enables are things that, are more efficient than the current system is utilizing.
Yeah. When you think about it, the blockchain is nothing but a very special kind of electronic ledger. And there are already traditional banking interests looking at using the ledger feature of the blockchain to improve their operations. They're perfectly happy, as I see it, to adopt the technology to further do what they're already doing. But you won't be able, through that system, you won't be able to acquire cryptocurrencies anonymously. You will not be able to acquire them from your neighbor. You will only be able to acquire them through the system that will make sure it knows who you are, where you are, your social security number, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the stuff that banks require now to have an account, you will be required to provide all that information just to have some bitcoins on a wallet, or some other currency on a wallet, or dollars on a wallet. Because think about it, most of the dollars and other fiat currencies in the world today exist in computers. Strings of zeros and ones. Oh my goodness. How did that get exempt from this new law? It's just strings of numbers and ones when it's in a bank. Yeah, well, that certainly... I guess I wanted to talk a little bit more about the blockchain or the ledger idea in regard to some of the technologies that and possibly how that relates to the Octologue. Okay.
Obviously cryptocurrency is something that transcends the current control system, the banking system.
Mm-hmm.
But if we combine that with the Octologue and the organizational technology of the Octologue, what kind of things would that mean?
I think that there's I think that the blockchain technology and the existence of cryptocurrencies is extremely timely for the development of the Octologue. And the reason for that is that the Octologue is based on an ethic. Everything comes back to the ethics. An Octologue properly set up is very unlikely to act unethically in any way, because all the members of the Octologue will understand what it means to be ethical. We have a very clearly defined definition. So what this means is, to me, that in the future, the blockchain will help us to maintain that ethical stance as we use cryptocurrencies in Octologues. That an Octologue will always prefer to use cryptocurrencies to fiat currencies because it's more ethical, because we're not being cheated when we use it, because the value is determined by the marketplace, not by some bureaucrat in Washington or elsewhere who takes it on himself to define what the value should be. This is vastly different than what goes on with cryptocurrencies. We have a real advantage in this. We have the advantage that people decide what something they own is worth to them. They decide the price at which they're willing to sell it or buy it. This is freedom. This is what we need. Government is going to make every effort to interfere with that because it takes power away from them. Almost all the power that the elite have today, they have because of fiat currencies, because they control the money supply. With the advent of cryptocurrencies, we now have money that they don't control. That is a possible opening to a future of freedom, autonomy, peace. All the things we really want in life can be available through the Octologue, providing we maintain some really clear-cut ethical standards, which includes how we deal with money.
Yeah, I can imagine, in the way I look at the idea of the Octologue and, the larger holomat is something where, businesses that adapt the Octologue are going to be the most trusted businesses.
Exactly.
People are going to look at them and be, similar to what Walmart did when it first got started. It basically had a very ethical way of doing business. We're going to buy stuff at wholesale prices and we're going to mark them up 10% or whatever the percentage is, but we're going to do that across the board. And that's essentially what we're going to do. We're not going to try and fool people with lost leaders or anything else. We're just going to, across the board, take what we can get and then put our markup on it and sell it. Mm-hmm. And, that really is what grew Walmart. Yep. The fact that they were a very ethical business, and if I went in there, I knew I was getting, a decent price for what I was looking for. Of course, a lot of this was before the internet, so there wasn't quite a bit of as much price comparison as there is today. Mm-hmm. But because of that circumstance, people knew that they could go to Walmart and get a decent product for a good price.
Right.
And so that drove a lot of business.
People want it.
I think one of the things that really appeals to me about the blockchain technology is the smart contracts. When I started to look into what smart contracts could potentially do is, instead of like the bottlenecks of, the way that business is done today through the banks, where, the government can essentially take the bottlenecks and use them as the way to tax everybody else as the money is distributed. With a smart contract, the money is automatically distributed.
Right.
And so for the government to try and chase down all those individual people that are getting paid when a smart contract is executed, especially if you look at something like a construction project, it makes their job infinitely harder to try and chase down everybody and get their part of get their tax in. And so I when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is great. And so if you combine that with the Octologue and the idea that businesses that are doing business can essentially supplant government services. It's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Essentially, everything will be more efficient, and super efficient in comparison to the way government does things.
I think we've quite a ways to go technologically before smart contracts of that sort are commonplace.
Yeah.
But I do think it'll come. I think that a number of things have to change for that to become established, not the least of which is the scalability. The biggest weakness, as I see it, of Bitcoin today is the slowness of transaction processing.
Yeah.
We're talking about 10 transactions a second or something like that. What if it was 20? Well, Visa does something like 20,000.
Yeah.
Orders of magnitude faster. So we will need eventually for our blockchain technology to reflect that need, and we'll have blockchains that are a lot faster. We will have cryptocurrencies that are faster. As a matter of fact, I'm aware of one cryptocurrency that's been under development for a while that actually has apparently solved that problem because they're able to keep up with the demands of Visa or Bank Americard or any of the credit card speeds of processing. There is at least one cryptocurrency now that can match that, and that is Nexus, the NexusCoin. I'm personally acquainted with its developer, and he's a brilliant guy, very well versed in the math, very well versed in the coding, and he has created a blockchain architecture that is much faster than Bitcoin. Eventually, that kind of architecture will have to be the dominant architecture because we basically have to compete with banks. The cryptocurrencies have to compete with banks for the volume of transactions and the speed with which they operate. But all of that is coming. It's all in the works. If Nexus can do it, others can do it. And eventually, the whole system is going to be more and more resistant to any kind of tracking and interception and so forth. It was invented for the purpose of giving people some kind of financial freedom, have a free market. There have been people trying to corrupt that purpose by saying, we're going to take the blockchain and we're going to give it to the banks, and the banks will use it instead of what they're using now. That seems to some people to make bank-operated blockchains desirable because they don't know the difference. But down below that level of understanding is a deeper level where the thing that gives cryptocurrency its value is the privacy. I believe that, people talk about, well, what's it backed up by? What are these cryptocurrencies backed up by? And some people say, it's backed up by math. That we trust math, therefore we trust the cryptocurrency. I think there's some truth to that. But I also believe that the main value that people pay for when they buy Bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies is the privacy. If they don't have if they have to buy it from an exchange where they have to identify themselves, it's not that interesting. It's just another bank, or another bank tool. But the moment you get away from that and you say, okay, well, I'm going to buy my Bitcoins from someone whose name I don't know his legal name. I only know his nickname. And he doesn't ask me any questions. And I'm going to buy my Bitcoins from him. I'll pay an extra premium for that privacy because it puts my Bitcoins pretty much beyond the reach of the plunderers who are constantly taxing us. So I think that's a really cool thing, that it's possible to do that. And this is what Morpheus does. He buys and sells Bitcoins essentially anonymously. And that makes it possible for people to get out of the banking system. which in and of itself is a wonderful thing, even though the bankers and the governments are all saying, oh, it's terrible, you're circumventing the banking system. Well, who the fuck cares about the banking system? I don't want them to be successful. I want them to fail. I want them to go out of business and be replaced by cryptocurrencies that can be bought and sold anonymously.
Yeah, I'm no expert when it comes to Bitcoin or the blockchain, honestly. I rely on other people that spend a lot more time looking into it. But I've certainly saw in the past few weeks, a couple of things. I think Nathan posted a thing about a speech by Andreas Antonopoulos, and he was talking about the ramifications of cryptocurrency essentially taking over all the aspects of what the banking industry delivers. All the things that the bank represents are things that we no longer need if we can, alter the cryptocurrency or advance the cryptocurrencies to deliver all the products and services that the current banking system delivers. And of course, do it much more efficiently.
Right. Right.
But of course, it relies on this idea of currency. If it functions as currency, then all these other things will, be an eventuality. But it does absolutely have to function as a currency first. The other one I was going to point out is Dash. Dash apparently is coming out with a new thing at the end of 2017. I believe they call it Evolution. I might be wrong about that. But, they're already going to create new services for their particular cryptocurrency that's going to allow people to essentially create accounts that aren't the numbers or, aren't represented by the numbers, but essentially are like bank accounts with person's name on it. Of course, it will have a level of security involved, but there's some other additional features that I think are really cool, like being able to put your value into different accounts, so you can essentially have like a savings account or an account that goes to the what do you call those when the transactions that happen on a monthly basis or whatever, So essentially they're already starting to create these banking services within cryptocurrency that I think are pretty exciting.
To me, the most exciting is still a different one. It's the fact that people can start a business and offer the IPO, or the initial funding of a business, can be done in cryptocurrency online. And the reason this is really important is because the SEC laws and regulations that govern the formation of a company today are horrible. For example, if you want to put a business together, you can request or offer shares in the business to 10 people legally. Well, if you happen to have 10 rich friends who love your idea, maybe you can fund a business that way. But generally speaking, that's uncommon. It's for the wealthy private entrepreneur who has well-to-do friends. They can put a business together, and they can do this privately, essentially. There are, of course, reporting requirements for the SEC. But now, if you want to go beyond a little business funded that way, it has been many years now that there are laws in place that basically say, I have to get a law firm that is familiar with IPOs. I have to get an accounting firm that is familiar with IPOs. I have to have someone put together for me a prospectus, which has to be approved by the SEC. And of course, in order to write that prospectus, I've got to have that law firm and that accounting firm working together to put all that together. And then I've got to get it approved, and it's oftentimes not approved the first time. So it means resubmitting, altering the documents until finally the government gives its approval, and now I can offer stock to the public.
But don't you have to have an investment banker to do that too?
Well, you might or might not. But the point is that it can cost at least minimum tens of thousands of dollars and often hundreds of thousands of dollars just to do the paperwork for all of that. This severely limits people's access to the opportunity to go into business. This is what drew all those millions of people to the United States when this didn't exist, and it was possible to simply say, "I'm selling shares. Who wants to buy?" Okay, well, what do you got? Here's a description of what I've got. Oh, well, that is what grew into the prospectus. But it was not formal. It was whatever you wanted to say, and people either trusted it or they didn't trust it. And maybe you're a scammer and people gave you money and you ran away with it. Or you were legitimate, people gave you money and you built a business with it. Yes, you have to do your due diligence. You have to know the person you're dealing with are trustworthy. But the government doesn't help in that. By formulating all these regulations, they just make it very hard to build a sizable business. Why should you or I not be able to say, okay, I'm going to sell 10 million shares at $10 a piece to whoever will buy them. And I'm going to build a business with that. And I'm going to divide up the profits among the shareholders in accordance with certain formulas that I can write down ahead of time. And I can offer that to the public. What's wrong with that? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what freedom is all about. And until we can do that, we're at the mercy of these bloody bureaucrats who want to control everything we do and take a share of everything we do.
Well, also imagine the ramifications of smart contracts. You could distribute earnings to people.
Yes.
And instead of having dividends every quarter or every annual time, essentially you could have them every day.
Or whenever you want.
Earning money all the time. Whenever a project finishes, boom, the money is dispersed.
Yeah.
And it's in their pocket.
It could be whenever a sale is made, the money goes out. Or any other criterion that is definable, you can build that into a blockchain contract.
Which means the amount of risk for the investor goes down.
Yes.
So this really is some amazing stuff. And then if you, again, combine it with the Octologue and a trustworthy organization, boy, it's just, the sky is the limit on this kind of, it's really exciting.
It is indeed.
When you really look at the ramifications. So the final point that I want to talk about in regard to this Bitcoin becoming illegal is what this could mean in regards to Acapulco and the anarcho-poco community here. I tend to believe that this is really good news for us, because I think this even makes us even more exciting, because Anarcho-poco or Acapulco as the center of the Octologue could also be the center of the cryptocurrency enthusiast.
Yes.
That people from all over North America, criminals from all over North America, could be running from those, from the law and right to a place like Acapulco where, being against the law or being, illegal is not necessarily a bad thing. I think the beauty that I see in Acapulco and in Mexico is people's disregard for what the government says.
Right.
And even when the government makes something illegal, more than likely, if it's something of value or something that people want, they just do it anyway.
Yes. Yes, the people in Mexico do not have a very high regard for law. They've not been as thoroughly indoctrinated as people in the United States, and they are much more likely to be impatient and disregarding of laws that are unethical. And this is something that goes back to Frederick Bastiat years ago in 1850. He had by then established quite a reputation for putting out information about what does government do that's okay and what does government do that's evil. He was a luminary when it came to that kind of information. And he pointed out that laws that forbid you to do something ethical and laws that require you do something unethical are not legitimate laws. Anyone who makes such laws does not have to be obeyed. We do not have to go along with these infamous things that are being set down on paper just because some people who call themselves politicians want to scam you by writing a piece of paper that takes something away from you. We don't have to go along with that, and most of the people in Mexico seem to get that. I'm reinforcing what you're saying, that here people do illegal things all the time, but as long as it's peaceful, nobody gives a damn. You know, if I am smoking an electronic cigarette or smoking pot or ignoring a stop sign when there's no traffic, the examples just go on and on. Mexican people do not revere law. And I think that's great. That's great because most of law is crooked. Yeah. Vast majority of law.
Yeah, and I think that's really the reason that the average Mexican sees the government as corrupt is the fact that they are corrupt.
They are
and
plunderers.
They are obviously corrupt. And honestly, I kind of see that as a positive because the average government employee in Mexico also understands that it's corrupt.
Yep.
And essentially, understands that there's a marketplace of value, I'm not doing anything wrong, but it's against the law. The policeman or whatever catches me doing it and essentially says, hold it, this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
I could make some money myself and just look the other way.
Right, and they do that all the time. They do that all the time. If you're stopped for some traffic thing, or you don't have a license plate on your car, or you're exceeding the speed limit, or whatever they want to tag you for.
I don't think there is any enforcement of speed limits. There might be some.
Well, there are topes. But I agree, and the fact is that I've had a little personal experience with this, and I know a lot of other people who've had personal experience. If a cop stops you, the question really is, what will it cost you out of pocket right now to get the cop to leave you alone? And typically it's about $10.
I don't even think it's that much.
Well, 200 pesos is about $10, and that's, I think, about an average price. Maybe it's high.
I'd say that's. I think you can get away with 50 myself. 50
really?
pesos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I've just got to be a little more forceful about it. And,
okay.
Essentially, it's like, you know what?
Whatever you're willing to do.
It's trouble for me to go through filling out the paperwork.
Yeah.
50 pesos, a couple bucks.
Yeah.
Let me just look the other way. What the hell? I'll have lunch.
Right. And this is how the cops operate here.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. As a matter of fact, I think that the cops here have no real regard for law. They have no real regard for, to them it's just, okay, if I put on this uniform and I walk around stopping people at random, I can make a little money. And probably my salary is not very high. So I count on the tips.
I think there's also a risk of putting on the uniform too. Because a lot of people don't like the cops.
Right.
And so
makes them a target.
To be agreeable to the public, is to essentially assure that you're not going to be a target for the public.
Right.
And if you try and really screw people over as a government official of some sort,
you're going to be in trouble.
You might really get yourself in some serious trouble.
Right, that's true too.
And I think it's pretty clear that if you talk to the average Mexican here, if they have a family member or a friend that's in the police or a government official, more than likely they don't want you to come over in any kind of official capacity and associate them with the government.
Right.
And so they
make them unpopular.
They kind of don't mention. They don't want you to mention anything about being associated with the government if you're just coming over for lunch or to a party or something like that. It's not. I don't think it's it's certainly not as looked up, as an occupation to be government employed.
Right.
In Mexico as it is in, say, the United States, where it's,
right.
Thank you for your service,
You're right. You're absolutely right. And it's a good thing that a disdain for laws that prohibit ordinary behavior is very ethical. And we're talking about mala prohibita. These are all the laws on the books that only exist because someone wants to impose their will on you. And that's most laws these days. There are thousands and thousands of laws in the United States alone. They have thousands of laws now coming out, and people don't even bother in the United States they don't even notice this until they get arrested for something, because they didn't know they were doing something illegal in the first place,
right.
Which shouldn't have been illegal in the first place.
They haven't hurt anybody, and that's usually the indicator that
right. No victim. No victim.
It shouldn't be against the law. But kind of wrapping this up, the idea that Bitcoin would be made illegal in some place like Mexico
highly unlikely.
Is almost ridiculous, because even if the government passed the law that said it was illegal,
it'd be ignored.
It would probably be more like advertising than anything else. The criminals would probably recognize Bitcoin or any of the other cryptocurrencies and start to wonder, well, what is this that's illegal? Right. Maybe I can make some money on it.
Exactly.
And sure enough, son of a gun. So I think Mexico is probably one of the best places on the planet to be dealing in cryptocurrency.
True.
And, being that, we've got an established community here in Acapulco, I think that means big things for the future here.
Yep.
And I'm really
excited
about that as well.
I can see it now. So Acapulco, the new home of cryptocurrency.
Yeah, so if the United States wants to pass illegal, Bitcoin, illegal laws all over the country,
fantastic.
Bring it on.
Bring it on, exactly. Well, I want to thank all our listeners for being here today. More and more people are starting to really enjoy our podcasts, as informal as they are. And I do appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Michael, for having made all of this possible. If it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't be here, and we wouldn't be doing all the wonderful things we're doing. So I thank you very much for that.
Well, I appreciate that, Bob. But, there's a lot of things yet to be done.
Absolutely.
And, we can pat ourselves on the back every once in a while, but we've still got a lot of things to do.
Yeah, I agree.
We've got new books to put out, and we've got workshops, and
a lot of things happening.
All kinds of things going on. And, in regard to Acapulco, we've created a community calendar recently.
Yeah.
So now activities for the entire community are essentially in front of people, so people can get together and interact in all kinds of different interests and so forth. And that's going to grow into something I'm really behind, which is kind of enhancing this idea of a knowledge economy. Encouraging people to teach other people about new things and technologies and techniques, and skills and knowledge that can help them.
Right.
These are all things that are going on here in Acapulco 24/7, 365.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
So with that said, I guess that's the end of our podcast 14. What are we looking forward to in future podcasts?
Well, we're going to do more stuff about the use of octologues in business. That's something we promised ourselves we would get into more. It's a huge advantage to a business to be organized as a holomat or an octologue. And then we'll build on that.
Yeah, and also for the audience, if anybody has suggestions of topics that they might want us to cover or things that we're not covering, I am, certainly excited about, we talked about this at the end of the other podcast about people putting out information or questions about what might be wrong with the octologue. I would like to kind of address issues that, maybe some of the negative features of octologue or some of the complaints about octologues.
Okay, if there are any.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where, this is also an opportunity to educate people about things that are maybe, beliefs that aren't exactly true, but might bring in a lot more interest.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot of misunderstanding still in the public about what it is we're doing and why it's a good thing. And people are questioning it. And I definitely want people to bring us the questions, because until we have the questions, we can't answer them.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of answers available for the right questions.
Absolutely.
So bring it on, and we'll see you there on the road to Acapulco.
So long.
Au revoir.